The heiress asked for a ride, but what she got was a wild night in the Mafia boss's car. The air inside the grand ballroom of the Marcelli Hotel was not oxygen. It was a stifling mixture of expensive perfume, old money, and the heavy, metallic scent of ambition. Lena Marcelli stood near the periphery of the room, her back straight, her smile fixed, and her spirit withering with every passing second. From the outside, she knew exactly what she looked like. She was the crown jewel of the Marcelli Empire. Her dress, a shimmering column of silver silk that had cost more than most people earned in a year, caught the light of the crystal chandeliers. Her dark hair was swept up in a style that took 2 hours to perfect, exposing the long, elegant line of her neck and the diamond necklace that felt less like jewelry and more like a collar. Victor Marcelli, her father and the architect of the city's skyline, stood 10 feet away. He was holding court with a group of investors from the Pacific Rim, men in sharp suits who nodded at his every word. Lena watched him. He was charismatic, powerful, and utterly terrifying in his expectations. Beside him stood Elise, her mother, who was currently sipping champagne and laughing at a joke that was likely not funny. Elise was the perfect accessory to Victor's power. Beautiful, cold, and unbreakable. Lena shifted her weight from one foot to the other. Her heels were pinching her toes, a dull ache that grounded her in the misery of the evening. She checked the time on her phone, concealing the screen behind her clutch. It was only 9 p.m. The gala was scheduled to run until midnight. 3 more hours of being a prop. 3 more hours of smiling until her face hurt. Lena, her father's voice boomed. It was a command, not a greeting. She snapped her head up, the mask of the dutiful daughter sliding instantly back into place. Victor was waving her over. She walked toward the group, conscious of the eyes following her. She was 23 years old, a college graduate with a degree in art history, yet here she was treated like a prize poodle at a dog show. "Gentlemen," Victor said, placing a heavy hand on her shoulder. His grip was tight, his fingers digging into her bare skin just enough to warn her to behave. "This is my daughter, Lena. The future of the Marcelli brand, she has her mother's beauty and my business sense." One of the investors, a man with graying hair and eyes that lingered too long on her neckline, smiled. "A pleasure. Miss Marcelli, your father tells us you are quite the asset to the family." Lena forced a smile. "Thank you. My father is very generous with his praise. He's generous with everything," the man replied smoothly. "We are looking forward to the partnership. With the new waterfront development, the Marcelli name will be untouchable." Victor laughed, a booming sound that echoed off the vaulted ceiling. "We are already untouchable, Lena. Get Mr. Henderson another drink." The command hung in the air. Lena felt heat rise in her cheeks. She was not a waitress. She was not staff. She was the heiress to the empire these men were drooling over. But defying Victor Marcelli in public was not something one did if they wanted to survive the car ride home. "Of course," Lena said, her voice tight. She turned and walked toward the bar, her hands trembling. Rage, hot and sharp, flared in her chest. She grabbed a crystal flute of champagne, but instead of returning to the circle of vultures, she kept walking. She passed the bar. She passed the string quartet playing a lifeless version of Mozart. She pushed through the heavy double doors leading to the lobby, ignoring the confused look of the doorman. The lobby was cooler, but it was still too crowded. Guests were arriving late, shedding fur coats and handing keys to valets. Lena needed air, real air. She needed to be somewhere where no one knew her last name, even if just for 5 minutes. She pushed through the revolving glass doors and stepped out onto the sidewalk. The night air of Harborview City hit her like a slap. It was mid-November, and the wind coming off the water was biting. She shivered, realizing too late that she had left her wrap inside, but she did not care. The cold felt real. It felt clean. She took a deep breath, closing her eyes, savoring the smell of exhaust and impending rain. "Lena, over here, Lena!" The shout shattered her peace. She opened her eyes to a wall of flashing lights. A swarm of paparazzi had been camping out on the sidewalk, waiting for a celebrity or a scandal. and Lena Marcelli, standing alone, shivering in a silver dress, was close enough to both. "Miss Marcelli, who are you wearing? Is it true the merger is in trouble? Lena, look this way." They surged forward like a wave. Microphones were shoved in her face. Phones were held aloft, recording her shock. Lena stumbled back, her heel catching on a crack in the pavement. Panic seized her throat. She could not go back inside. Her father would be furious that she had made a scene. She could not stay here. They were boxing her in, blinding her with flashes. She needed to leave, now. Her eyes scanned the curb. The valet line was chaotic. Cars backed up 3 deep, but near the end of the line, idling with a quiet menace, was a black luxury sedan. It looked exactly like her father's car, a sleek, armored beast with tinted windows that promised oblivion. It had to be her driver. Victor always kept a car on standby. "Excuse me," Lena yelled, pushing past a photographer who was practically standing on her toes. She bolted toward the car. The paparazzi followed, a pack of wolves sensing a wounded deer. Lena reached the back door of the sedan, wrenched it open, and dove inside. She slammed the door shut, cutting off the noise of the outside world instantly. The silence in the car was absolute. The air was warm and smelled of expensive leather, cedarwood, and something sharp, like gun oil. Lena slumped back against the seat, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She closed her eyes, exhaling a shaky breath. "Thank God," she whispered. "Just drive, Thomas. Please, get me out of here." There was a pause, a beat of silence that lasted 2 seconds too long. The car did not move. Lena opened her eyes. She looked toward the front. The partition was down. The man behind the wheel was not Thomas, her family's elderly, chatty driver. This man was younger, with a shaved head and a neck as thick as a tree trunk. He was staring at her in the rearview mirror, his expression one of utter confusion. "Drive." "Nico." The voice came from the front passenger seat. It was deep, calm, and resonated with a terrifying kind of authority. Lena froze. She turned her head slowly to look at the passenger seat. The man sitting there was not her father. He was looking at her over his shoulder, one arm resting casually on the back of his seat. He was devastatingly handsome in a way that set off alarm bells in her primitive brain. He wore a black suit that fit him like a second skin, the fabric straining slightly across broad shoulders. His shirt collar was unbuttoned at the top, revealing the edge of a tattoo, black ink spiraling up his neck before disappearing beneath the crisp white fabric. His hair was dark, swept back, and his eyes were the color of steel, cold and amused. He radiated a controlled, dangerous energy that made the air in the car feel thinner than it had outside. "Who are you?" Lena gasped, shrinking back against the door. "I should be asking you that," the man said, his voice smooth like velvet over gravel. "Considering you just hijacked my car." Lena's hand fumbled for the door handle. Locked. Of course it was locked. "Let me out," she demanded, though her voice shook. "This is a mistake. I thought this was my father's car." The man tilted his head, studying her. He did not look threatened. He looked like a predator who had just found a rabbit in his den and was deciding whether to eat it or keep it as a pet. "Your father must have excellent taste in vehicles," he drawled. "Nico." I said drive. "The cameras are getting close." The driver, Nico, nodded once and punched the gas. The car surged forward, merging aggressively into the Harborview traffic. Lena was thrown back against the leather seat. "No, stop," Lena shouted. "You can't just take me. Do you know who I am?" The man in the front seat chuckled, a low, dark sound. "I know exactly who you are." Lena Marcelli. It is hard to miss the princess of the city when her face is plastered on every billboard from here to the airport. He turned around fully now, shifting in his seat so he could watch her. His gaze dropped to her hands, which were trembling violently in her lap, and then moved up to her flushed cheeks. A spark of interest lit up his eyes. "You are shaking," he observed. "I am being kidnapped," she snapped, fear making her bold. "Kidnapped implies intent," he replied calmly. "You jumped in my car, remember? I am just giving you the ride you asked for. I want to go home. Take me to the estate." The man watched her for another moment, his eyes lingering on the pulse fluttering in her throat. Then he turned back to face the road. "Not yet," he said. "What do you mean? Not yet," Lena demanded, leaning forward. "Who are you?" "Dante," he said simply. "Dante Moretti." The name hit her like a physical blow. Lena stopped breathing. She knew that name. Everyone in Harborview knew that name, though it was rarely spoken above a whisper in her social circles. Dante Moretti was a ghost story. He was the head of the syndicate that controlled the docks, the unions, and half the nightlife in the city. He was a man her father had warned her never to look in the eye, and she was sitting in his back seat. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Relax," Dante said, his eyes watching the side mirror. "I do not eat heiresses for dinner. Usually." Before Lena could process the terror rising in her throat, the car swerved violently to the left. Lena gasped, grabbing the leather armrest to keep from being thrown across the seat. "Boss," Nico said, his voice tight. "We have a tail. Black SUV, no plates." Dante's demeanor shifted instantly. The amusement vanished. His posture went rigid, tactical. He did not look at Lena. He looked at the road, his eyes narrowing. "Is it Viscari?" Dante asked sharply. "Looks like his crew," Nico confirmed, glancing in the rearview mirror. "They are gaining. Lose them," Dante ordered. "Do not let them get alongside us." The car accelerated, the engine roaring with a power that vibrated through the chassis. Lena watched in horror as the speedometer climbed, 80, 90. They were weaving through the downtown traffic, cutting off taxis and blasting through red lights. "What is happening?" Lena cried out, bracing herself as the car drifted around a sharp corner. "Keep your head down," Dante commanded. His voice was no longer teasing. It was the voice of a general in the field. "I want to get out," Lena screamed. "Unless you want to exit a vehicle moving at 100 miles per hour. I suggest you sit back and shut up." Dante snapped. He looked back at her then, and for the first time, Lena saw the violence beneath the suit. It was not directed at her, but it was there, a coiled spring ready to snap. "There are men in that SUV who want me dead." "Lena," he said, his words clipping out fast and hard. "If they stop us, they will not ask for your autograph. Do you understand?" Lena stared at him, wide-eyed. The reality of the situation crashed down on her. This was not a movie. This was not a misunderstanding. She was in the middle of a war zone. She nodded, unable to speak. "Good," Dante said. "Nico, take the lower level, cut through the garment district." The car lurched as Nico spun the wheel. They dove down a ramp, the tires screaming against the asphalt. The sudden darkness of the underpass swallowed them. Lena looked out the back window. The black SUV was still there, relentless, its headlights blinding in the gloom. "Why are they chasing you?" Lena asked, her voice trembling. "Because they want what I have," Dante said, his eyes scanning the road ahead. "Territory, money, power," Dante corrected. "And right now, leverage." He pulled a phone from his pocket, his thumbs flying across the screen. Lena watched him. He was terrifyingly calm. While she felt like she was going to vomit from fear, he looked like he was solving a crossword puzzle. "You are a criminal," Lena whispered. "Nah." The words slipped out before she could stop them. Dante looked up from his phone. His eyes met hers in the rearview mirror. "And your father is a saint?" he asked, an eyebrow raised. "My father builds hotels," Lena defended, though the conviction in her voice was weak. "He is a legitimate businessman." Dante laughed, a harsh, barking sound. "Your father builds hotels with steel and concrete bought from my companies. He pays off inspectors with cash that comes from my vaults. Do not preach to me about morality. Princess, your family's empire is built on the same mud as mine. I just don't pretend my hands are clean." Lena felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. "That's a lie, is it?" Dante challenged. "Ask him about the labor strikes in '98. Ask him about the zoning permits for the Marina District. Or better yet, ask him why he pays a consultation fee of $50,000 a month to a shell company called Northbridge." Lena fell silent. She didn't know what he was talking about, but the specific details gnawed at her. "Hold on," Nico shouted. The car slammed on its brakes. Lena flew forward, the seatbelt catching her hard across the chest. Nico yanked the wheel to the right, sending the heavy sedan skidding into a narrow alleyway. The side mirrors scraped against the brick walls with a screech that set Lena's teeth on edge. They burst out the other side onto a quiet industrial street. Nico killed the headlights instantly. The car ghosted forward in the dark, turning sharply into the entrance of a multi-story concrete parking structure. Up to the 4th level, Dante ordered in a whisper. Park in the shadows. The car spiraled up the ramps. Lena held her breath, listening for the roar of the pursuing SUV. But there was nothing. Just the hum of their own engine and the sound of her own blood rushing in her ears. Nico pulled the car into a dark corner on the 4th floor, behind a concrete pillar. He killed the engine. Silence descended like a heavy blanket. For a long minute, no one moved. Dante sat perfectly still, his head cocked to the side, listening. Lena could hear the distant sounds of the city, sirens, honking horns, but they felt a world away. Clear, Nico murmured. Dante let out a long breath. He unbuckled his seatbelt and turned around, kneeling on the front seat to face Lena fully. The dim orange light from a distant street lamp filtered through the tinted windows, illuminating half his face. He looked tired now, the adrenaline fading to reveal a weary intensity. "Are you hurt?" he asked. His voice was softer now, stripped of the mockery. Lena shook her head, though her whole body was vibrating. I don't think so." Dante reached into the back seat. Lena flinched, pressing herself against the door. He paused, his hand hovering in the air. "I am not going to hurt you," he said quietly. "I need to check your eyes. You hit your head when we turned." He moved his hand slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, he reached out and gently tilted her chin up. His fingers were rough, calloused, but his touch was surprisingly light. "Look at me," he commanded softly. Lena looked. His eyes were storm gray, framed by thick lashes. Up close, she could smell him, the cedar, the expensive cologne, and the metallic tang of adrenaline. He was terrifying, yes, but there was something else there too, something magnetic. He studied her pupils, his face inches from hers. Lena held her breath. She had never been this close to a man who wasn't trying to sell her father something or take her picture. This was raw. It was intimate in a way that made her skin prickle. His thumb brushed against her cheekbone, wiping away a smudge of mascara. His gaze dropped to her lips for a fraction of a second, and the air between them suddenly felt charged. Electric. "You are fine," Dante murmured, his voice dropping an octave. "No concussion." "Just scared." "I am not scared," Lena lied, her voice breathless. Dante smirked, the corner of his mouth twitching up. "You are terrified, Lena, and you should be. You just stepped into the deep end of the pool." He pulled his hand back, the loss of contact leaving her skin feeling cold. Lena stared at him, her heart rate refusing to slow down. She felt a strange pull in her chest, a curiosity that warred with her survival instinct. She should be screaming, she should be running, but she was frozen, captivated by the monster in the front seat. "Take me home," she whispered. "Please." Dante stared at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he turned back around and settled into his seat. "We will wait 10 minutes to make sure they are gone," he said, his voice returning to that cool, detached tone. "Then I will take you to a place where we can talk." "Talk?" Lena asked. "I do not want to talk. I want to go to my house." Dante looked at her in the mirror again. "I cannot take you home. Lena, not yet." "Why?" "Because," Dante said grimly, looking out at the dark city skyline. "If Vescari saw you in my car, he thinks you are part of the game now. And if I drop you off at your front door, I am just painting a target on your back." Lena stared at the back of his head, the weight of his words sinking in. The wild night was not over. It was just beginning. The engine of the black sedan purred with a low, predatory rumble as they merged back onto the highway, but Lena noticed immediately that they were not heading toward the expansive, manicured lawns of the Marcelli estate. Instead, the car was climbing. The city lights of Harborview began to drop away, transforming into a glittering carpet of diamonds against the velvet dark of the bay. "You are going the wrong way," Lena said, her voice sharp. The panic from the chase had settled into a cold, hard knot in her stomach, but she refused to let it show. "My house is north." "We are heading west toward the cliffs. I know where you live." "Lena," Dante replied from the front seat. He did not turn around this time. He was watching the mirrors, his attention split between the road ahead and the potential threats behind. "But I am not taking you there. Not yet. This is kidnapping," Lena snapped, reaching for her phone. "I am calling the police." Dante's hand shot out, not to grab her, but to turn down the radio, drowning the car in silence. "Go ahead," he said, his voice terrifyingly calm. "Call them. Tell them you are in Dante Moretti's car. Within 10 minutes, every scanner in the city will pick it up. By the time the squad cars arrive, the paparazzi will be there too. Is that what you want? A photo of the Marcelli heiress being pulled out of a crime boss's back seat in her gala dress?" Lena's thumb hovered over the screen. He was right. The scandal would be instantaneous and catastrophic. Her father would be apoplectic. Her mother would likely faint from the sheer impropriety of it all. She lowered the phone, defeating, slumping her shoulders. "Where are we going? Somewhere quiet," Dante said. "Somewhere without microphones and cameras. We need to talk, and I do not trust the air in your penthouse any more than I trust the streets right now." 10 minutes later, the car slowed, turning onto a gravel turnout at the top of Outlook Point. It was a secluded spot, usually frequented by teenagers looking for privacy, but tonight it was empty. The wind whipped off the ocean, rattling the bare branches of the trees lining the cliff edge. Below them, Harborview City was a sprawling grid of gold and amber light, beautiful and deceptive. Dante killed the engine. The silence that rushed in was heavy. "Stay here, Nico," Dante instructed the driver. He opened his door and stepped out into the chill night air. He walked to the edge of the overlook, lighting a cigarette, the small flame flaring briefly against the darkness. Lena watched him for a moment. He looked like a statue carved from shadows, his silhouette imposing against the skyline. She could have stayed in the car. It was warm, safe, and armored, but something about his arrogance, the way he assumed he could just drive her around the city like luggage, ignited a spark of defiance in her chest. Lena pushed her door open and stepped out. The wind bit through her silk dress instantly, raising goose flesh on her arms, but she folded them across her chest and marched toward him. "You cannot just bring me here," she said, her voice fighting the wind. "I have security protocols. My father will have teams looking for me." Dante exhaled a plume of smoke, not looking at her. He kept his eyes on the city below. "Your father's security teams are exactly why we were chased," he said flatly. "That is ridiculous," Lena scoffed, stepping closer. Her high heels crunched on the gravel. "Those men were chasing you. You said it yourself. They are your rivals. They are my rivals." "Yes," Dante agreed, finally turning to face her. The orange glow of the distant city reflected in his eyes, making them look like burning steel. "But they were tailing you, Lena. They were waiting outside the gala. They did not know I was there until I pulled out. They thought they were following the Marcelli princess home." Lena froze. "Why would they follow me? I have nothing to do with your world." Dante laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "You have everything to do with my world. You just do not know it." He took a step toward her, and instinctively, she held her ground, though every nerve in her body told her to retreat. "Your father is not just a hotelier." "Lena," Dante said, his voice dropping low, "the Marcelli Corporation is a washing machine. A very expensive, very efficient washing machine for dirty money." "That is a lie," Lena spat, shaking her head. "My father built this city. He's a legitimate businessman. He's a partner to sharks," Dante corrected. "For the last 5 years. He's been laundering money for the Vescari crime family. Northbridge Holdings? That is Vescari's shell company. They pump cash from narcotics and gambling into your father's construction projects. The buildings go up, the money comes out clean, and your father takes a 20% cut." "No," Lena whispered. The word caught in her throat. She wanted to scream at him, to tell him he was a liar, but a cold sliver of doubt pierced her heart. She remembered the hushed phone calls in her father's study, the meetings with men who didn't look like bankers, the files locked away in safes she wasn't allowed to touch. "It is the truth," Dante said, tossing his cigarette to the ground and crushing it under his boot. "And recently, your father got greedy. He started holding back payments, trying to renegotiate terms with men who do not negotiate. That is why Vescari's men were outside tonight. They were not there to ask for a loan. They were there to grab you and remind Victor Marcelli who really owns him." Lena felt the world tilt on its axis. She wrapped her arms tighter around herself, shivering violently now, and she wasn't sure if it was the cold or the horror of what he was saying. "I don't believe you," she said, her voice trembling. "You're just trying to scare me. You are a criminal. Why should I trust a word you say?" "You shouldn't," Dante said simply, "but I am the only one standing between you and the trunk of a Vescari car right now, so you might want to start listening." He studied her then, really looked at her. He saw the way she was vibrating with cold, the way her knuckles were white where she gripped her own arms. His expression softened, just a fraction. He took off his suit jacket, the movement fluid and quick, and stepped forward to drape it over her shoulders. It was heavy and warm, smelling of him, tobacco, leather, and that sharp, clean scent of danger. Lena was too stunned to reject it. She pulled the lapels tight, drowning in the fabric. "Why?" Dante asked quietly. "Why what?" Lena managed to ask, her teeth chattering. "Why did you get in my car?" Lena looked away, staring at the glittering lights of the city that suddenly felt like a prison. "I told you," she said, "I was escaping the paparazzi." "You have security," Dante countered. "You have a driver. You could have gone back inside the hotel. But you didn't. You saw a black car. You didn't check the plate, and you jumped in. That is not just panic. Lena, that is desperation." Lena swallowed hard. The wind whipped a strand of hair across her face. Sticking to her lip gloss, she peeled it away, her hands shaking. I wanted to disappear," she admitted, her voice so quiet the wind almost stole it. Dante stepped closer, blocking the wind with his body. "Disappear? You are the face of the city." "I am a billboard," Lena corrected bitterly, tears pricking her eyes. "I am a prop for my father's investors. Look at the perfect daughter. Look at the perfect life." I stood there tonight, in a dress that costs more than a house, feeling like I couldn't breathe. I just wanted, I don't know. I wanted 5 minutes where I wasn't Lena Marcelli. I wanted to be a normal girl who just needed a ride home. Her voice cracked on the last word, the adrenaline from the chase, the shock of his accusations, and the exhaustion of the night finally crashed into her. Her chest tightened. Her breath started coming in short, shallow gasps. "Hey," Dante said, his voice changing instantly. It lost its hard edge, becoming low and steady. "I can't—" Lena gasped, clutching his jacket. The air felt too thin. The ground felt like it was swaying. "I can't breathe. Panic attack," Dante noted. He didn't ask, he knew. He moved in, closing the distance between them. He didn't grab her roughly. Instead, he took her wrist, his large hand wrapping completely around it. His fingers were warm and calloused, an anchor in the storm of her anxiety. "Lena, look at me," he commanded, but gently. She shook her head, her vision swimming with black spots. "I can't." "Yes, you can. Look at me." She forced her eyes up. Dante was right there, filling her vision. He wasn't looking at her with pity. He was looking at her with a calm, absolute focus. "Feel my hand?" he asked. She nodded jerkily. "Feel your pulse? It is racing. We're going to slow it down." He took her other hand and placed it flat against his chest, right over his heart, beneath the crisp white shirt. She could feel the slow, steady thud of his heartbeat. It was powerful, unhurried, a stark contrast to the frantic flutter of her own. "Breathe with me," Dante said. He inhaled deeply, his chest expanding under her palm. Lena tried to mimic him, sucking in a jagged breath. "Hold it," he instructed. 1, 2, 3, now out, slow." He exhaled, a long, controlled breath. Lena followed, her shoulders dropping an inch. Again. In. They stood there on the edge of the cliff, the wind howling around them, locked in a bubble of silence. Dante kept his eyes on hers, grounding her, his thumb rubbing slow, rhythmic circles on the inside of her wrist. It was an incredibly intimate gesture, far more personal than anything she had ever experienced with the polished, safe boys her father introduced her to. Slowly, the black spots faded, the vice around her chest loosened. Her breathing synced with his, deep, rhythmic, steady. "Better?" Dante murmured. Lena nodded, realizing suddenly how close they were. Her hand was still on his chest. His hand was still holding her wrist. She could see the flecks of silver in his gray eyes, the faint scar cutting through his left eyebrow. "Yes," she whispered. "Thank you." She didn't pull away. She should have. She knew she should have, but the warmth radiating from him was intoxicating. For the first time all night, maybe for the first time in years, she felt safe. Not safe because she was sheltered, but safe because the most dangerous thing in the world was standing between her and everything else. Dante didn't pull away either. His gaze dropped from her eyes to her lips. The air between them thickened, charging with a static electricity that made Lena's breath catch again, but for a very different reason. His hand on her wrist slid up, his fingers brushing the sensitive skin of her forearm, sending a shiver racing straight to her spine. He leaned in, just an inch. Lena's eyelids fluttered. She found herself leaning toward him, drawn by a magnetic pull she couldn't rationalize. She wanted him to kiss her. It was a reckless, insane thought, but she wanted it with a sudden, fierce hunger. Dante froze. His jaw tightened. The spell broke. He pulled his head back, though he didn't let go of her arm. "Do not look at me like that." "Lena," he murmured, his voice rough. "Like what?" she whispered. "Like I am the hero of this story." He said, "I am not." He released her arm and stepped back, creating a cold void between them. "Men like me. We destroy things. Lena, even the beautiful things, especially the beautiful things. Do not trust me just because I helped you breathe." He turned his back on her, walking toward the car. "Get in," he said over his shoulder. "I am taking you back." The drive down from the overlook was silent. Lena huddled in his jacket, the scent of him surrounding her, feeling foolish and confused. Dante was back to being the cold, tactical general, his eyes scanning the mirrors. They had just merged onto the main avenue leading toward the Marcelli estate, when Nico swore softly in Italian. "Boss," Dante said, eyes snapping to the rearview mirror. "We have company again." Lena whipped her head around. Behind them, another dark SUV had appeared, swerving through traffic to catch up. It wasn't the same one as before. This one was larger, aggressive, its grille reinforced with a heavy guard. "Is it them?" Lena asked, fear spiking again. Dante didn't answer. He watched the SUV accelerate. "They are not trying to tail us this time," Dante said, his voice devoid of emotion. "They are trying to run us off the road." They were approaching a massive concrete bridge that spanned the industrial canal. The road was narrower here, walled in by high barriers. "Stop the car," Dante ordered. "What?" Nico and Lena said in unison. "Stop the car! Under the bridge! Now!" "But boss," Nico started. "Do it, Nico. I am done running." Nico slammed on the brakes. The heavy sedan skidded to a halt in the shadows beneath the bridge's massive support arches. The SUV behind them screeched to a stop 30 feet away, its high beams blinding in the dark. Dante unbuckled his seatbelt. He turned to Lena. "Stay down. Do not open this door unless I tell you to." He reached under his seat and pulled out a heavy, matte black pistol. He checked the chamber with a fluid, practiced motion that terrified Lena more than the chase had. "Dante, don't—" Lena started, grabbing his arm. He looked at her hand, then at her eyes. "Keep your head down, Lena." He opened the door and stepped out. "Nico, watch her," Dante commanded, shutting the door. Lena scrambled to the window, peering out into the gloom. The scene unfolding looked like a nightmare. 4 men spilled out of the SUV. They were wearing ski masks and carrying baseball bats and crowbars. Brutal. Messy weapons meant to send a message, not just to kill. Dante walked toward them. He didn't run. He didn't shout. He just walked, his gun held loosely at his side, pointing at the pavement. He looked utterly relaxed, as if he were walking across a hotel lobby rather than into a brawl. The leader of the attackers, a giant of a man wielding a tire iron, charged forward. "Give us the girl, Moretti," the man roared. Dante didn't break stride. When the man swung the iron, Dante moved with a speed that blurred in the dim light. He sidestepped the blow, stepped inside the man's guard, and drove the butt of his pistol into the attacker's temple. The sound was a sickening crack. The man dropped like a stone. The other three hesitated. Dante stepped over the fallen man. He raised his gun, leveling it at the center of the group. He didn't fire. He just stood there, the weapon an extension of his arm, his face a mask of cold, terrifying authority. "You are out of your depth," Dante said. His voice wasn't loud, but it echoed off the concrete walls of the underpass. "Go back to Vascari. Tell him if he wants my attention. He has it, but if he touches her, I will burn everything he owns to the ground." One of the men took a step forward, raising a bat. Dante shifted his aim instantly. He fired a single shot. The bullet sparked off the concrete inches from the man's toe. The deafening report of the gun silenced the night. "The next one goes in your knee," Dante said calmly. "Walk away." The men looked at their fallen leader, then at the gun, then at the cold, dead eyes of the man holding it. They made the calculation. They dropped their weapons and dragged their unconscious comrade back to the SUV. Tires squealed as they reversed frantically, peeling away into the night. Dante watched them go. He didn't move until their taillights disappeared. Then he engaged the safety on his gun, tucked it into the back of his waistband, and turned back to his car. Inside the sedan, Lena let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. She was shaking, but not just from fear. She was awestruck. She had grown up around powerful men who commanded boardrooms and shouted at assistants, but she had never seen power like that. It was raw, physical, and absolute. Dante opened the back door. The overhead light flickered on. He looked over her, checking for injuries. "Are you okay?" he asked. Lena nodded mutely. She unbuckled her seatbelt and, before she could think it through, stepped out of the car. Her legs felt wobbly. "What are you doing? Get back inside," Dante said, frowning. I needed to see that you were okay," she said, her voice small. She looked at him. He was unharmed. His suit was barely rumpled, but the energy radiating off him was intense, a buzzing heat that seemed to pull her closer. Dante looked down at her. The adrenaline was still coursing through him. She could see it in the dilation of his pupils, the tight set of his jaw. He reached out and touched her elbow to steady her as she swayed slightly in her heels. His thumb brushed the soft skin of her inner arm. The touch sent a jolt of electricity through her that made her knees weak. It wasn't the cold fear of earlier. It was a rush of heat that settled low in her stomach. "I am fine. Lena," he said, his voice rougher than usual. "I do this for a living. You do not." He guided her back into the car, his hand lingering on her arm for a second longer than necessary. 10 minutes later, the sedan idled on a quiet side street 2 blocks from the Marcelli estate. The massive iron gates of her home were visible in the distance, guarded by security teams that had failed to protect her. "I cannot drop you at the gate," Dante said, watching the entrance. "If my car is seen on the cameras, your father will ask questions you do not want to answer yet." Lena nodded. She opened the door. Sliding out onto the pavement, she still had his jacket around her shoulders. She started to shrug it off, but Dante shook his head. "Keep it," he said. "It is cold. How will I return it?" Lena asked. Dante looked at her, his arm resting on the open window. A ghost of a smile touched his lips, dangerous and promising. "I have a feeling I will be seeing you again, Lena." Lena stood on the sidewalk, the oversized jacket engulfing her, smelling of him. "This isn't over, is it?" she asked softly. Dante's expression darkened. "Someone put you in danger tonight, Lena. I intend to find out who, and until I do, watch your back." He rolled up the window. The black sedan pulled away, disappearing into the shadows of the tree-lined street. Lena stood there for a long time, watching the empty road. She should have been terrified. She should have been running to her father's security. But as she turned toward the gilded cage of her family's estate, all she could feel was the phantom weight of Dante's hand on her wrist, and a pull toward the darkness that she couldn't rationalize. The silence inside the Marcelli manor was not peaceful. It was the heavy, suffocating silence of a vault. When Lena walked through the front doors, the grandfather clock in the foyer was chiming 1 in the morning. She still wore Dante's suit jacket over her silver gala dress, a stark, oversized flag of rebellion draped across her shoulders. Her parents were waiting in the library. Victor Marcelli stood by the fireplace, a tumbler of scotch in his hand. Elise sat on the edge of a velvet armchair, her posture perfect, her face a mask of disappointed, icy calm. "Where have you been?" Victor asked. He did not shout. He did not have to. His voice carried the weight of the entire Marcelli empire, a tone that had crushed union leaders and city councilmen for decades. I needed air," Lena stammered, stepping into the room. The warmth of the fire did not reach her. She felt exposed, even beneath the heavy wool of the jacket. "I got overwhelmed at the gala." "Overwhelmed," Victor repeated, turning to face her. He took a sip of his drink, his eyes hard. "You embarrassed us." "Lena, I had investors asking where my daughter went. I had partners, important partners, who were very eager to meet you, and you vanished into thin air." "Partners," Lena echoed. The word landed differently now. Before tonight, it had meant bankers and architects. Now, after her conversation with Dante, it tasted like ash. "Yes, partners," Victor snapped, setting his glass down on the mantel with a sharp clink. "Men who ensure our projects move forward, men who do not appreciate being snubbed. Do you have any idea how fragile these deals are?" "Victor, please," Elise said softly, though her eyes remained on Lena's attire. "Lena, whose jacket is that? It certainly does not belong to your father." Lena pulled the lapels tighter. "It belongs to a friend. He gave me a ride home." "A friend," Victor scoffed. "You do not have friends. Lena, you have acquaintances. And if this friend is not on our approved list, he is a liability. Go to your room. We will discuss the damage control in the morning." Lena turned to leave, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. As she passed her father's massive mahogany desk, her eyes caught something. Amidst the perfectly organized stacks of blueprints and contracts, one manila folder sat slightly askew, as if it had been consulted recently and hastily set down. The label on the tab was handwritten in black ink, Northbridge Holdings. The air left Lena's lungs. It was the name Dante had mentioned on the cliff, the shell company, the washing machine. She forced herself to keep walking, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor, but her mind was racing. It was real. Dante had not been lying to scare her. The monster was not under her bed. The monster was sitting in her father's library, drinking scotch. Once in her bedroom. Lena locked the door. She stripped off the silver dress, leaving it in a shimmering pile on the floor, but she kept the jacket. She sat on the edge of her bed, wrapping the oversized garment around herself, inhaling the faint scent of cedar and tobacco that still clung to the fabric. It was grounding. It was the only thing in the room that felt honest. She reached into the pocket, intending to check for a receipt or a business card, anything that would give her a connection to him. Her fingers brushed against cold metal. She pulled out a phone. It was not hers. It was a sleek, black burner phone, inexpensive and disposable. It must have been slipped into the pocket by Nico while she was distracted in the car. As she held it, the screen lit up with a single text message. There was no number, just a sender ID that read unknown. The message was brief. "The Blackbird Cafe, Arts District, 2 in the afternoon, if you want the rest of the truth." Lena stared at the screen until the backlight faded to black. The next morning, the atmosphere in the house was brittle. Lena avoided her parents, pleading a headache. She spent the hours in her room, hunched over her laptop, digging. She searched for Northbridge Holdings. The results were sparse. A generic landing page with stock photos of skyscrapers, a registered address in the Cayman Islands, and a board of directors listed only by initials. But when she cross-referenced the names with local news archives, she found fragments. A zoning permit granted to Northbridge for a warehouse district that had previously been protected land. a lawsuit regarding a construction accident at a Northbridge site, settled out of court for an undisclosed sum, and then, buried in a deep web financial forum, a thread speculating on the rise of the Vascari crime family. One user had posted a flowchart of suspected fronts. Right there, branching off from Vascari's main operation, was Northbridge, and branching off from Northbridge, connected by a dotted line, was the Marcelli Hotel Group. Lena shut the laptop, her hands trembling. The connection was there. Her father wasn't just building hotels, he was building vaults for blood money. And the men who had chased them last night, the men with the bats and the guns, they were not just random thugs, they were her father's business associates. By 1 o'clock, the walls of the mansion felt like they were closing in. Lena changed into jeans and a thick sweater, pulling her hair back into a messy bun. She needed to be invisible. She told the housekeeper she was going to the library downtown to research art history references. She took a taxi to the edge of the arts district, getting out 3 blocks early to walk. This part of the city was gritty, alive with graffiti murals and the smell of roasting coffee and rain. It was a world away from the manicured silence of her neighborhood. The Blackbird Cafe was a small, industrial space with exposed brick walls and indie music playing softly over the speakers. It was crowded with students and artists, people who barely looked up as she entered. Lena scanned the room. He was in the back corner, sitting at a small table with his back to the wall, watching the door. Dante looked different. The bespoke suit was gone. He wore dark jeans and a black leather jacket over a gray t-shirt. He looked younger, rougher, less like a kingpin and more like the dangerous street fighter he had been before he took the throne. But the eyes were the same, steel gray, intelligent and tracking her every move. Lena wove through the tables and sat across from him. She felt painfully out of place, a porcelain doll in a mechanic's shop. "You came," Dante said. His voice was low, barely carrying over the sound of the espresso machine. "You left a phone in my pocket," Lena replied, placing the burner on the table between them. "That is stalking." "Dante, that is insurance," Dante corrected. "I needed a way to reach you that your father's security team could not monitor." "Did you look it up?" Lena didn't have to ask what he meant. She nodded, her throat tight. "Northbridge," she whispered. "I found the file in my father's office, and I found the forum posts online." Dante nodded slowly, taking a sip of his black coffee. "Then you know I was telling the truth. I know there is a connection," Lena said, her voice wavering. "But my father? He might not know. He uses contractors. He uses consultants. He could be a victim in this too." Dante sighed, a heavy, weary sound. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. "Lena, look at me. Your father is not a victim. He's a man who made a deal with the devil because he wanted to build the tallest tower in the city. He knew exactly who Vascari was when he signed those contracts. The problem is, Vascari is not a bank. You cannot just pay off the loan and walk away." "What does that mean?" Lena asked, fear prickling at her skin. "It means your father is trying to get out," Dante said. "I have heard whispers on the street. Victor is trying to liquidate assets, trying to move money into offshore accounts that Northbridge cannot touch. He thinks he can buy his freedom, but he can't." "No," Dante said grimly. "Vascari does not let people retire. If your father tries to cut him out, Vascari will burn the Marcelli empire to the ground to make a point, and he will start with the things Victor loves most." Lena felt the blood drain from her face. "Me? You are the leverage. Lena, why do you think they tried to grab you last night? It wasn't random. If they have you, your father signs whatever they want him to sign. He keeps laundering their money until there is nothing left." Lena stared at her hands, which were clenched together on the tabletop. The horror of it was overwhelming. Her entire life, the galas, the dresses, the private schools, it was all funded by this. It was all resting on a foundation of threats and violence. "I don't know what to do," she whispered. The tears she had been holding back since the night before finally spilled over. "I can't go to the police. It would destroy him, but I can't. I can't go home and pretend I don't know that my house is built on a graveyard." Her shoulders began to shake. She felt small and stupid and incredibly alone. Suddenly, A warm hand covered hers. Dante reached across the table. His fingers curled gently around her wrist, his thumb pressing against her pulse point. It was the same gesture he had used in the car, a physical anchor in the middle of her emotional free fall. "Breathe," he commanded softly. Lena looked up at him through her tears. His face was hard, but his eyes were fierce. He wasn't looking at her with pity. He was looking at her with a protective intensity that made her breath hitch. "You are not alone in this," Dante said. "I'm not going to let them take you." "Why?" Lena asked, her voice breaking. "Why do you care? You are a criminal, too. You said it yourself. You are just a rival gang, because," Dante said, his thumb brushing the sensitive skin of her wrist, "I might be a monster, Lena, but I have a code. We do not touch civilians, and we certainly do not drag women into our wars." He squeezed her hand. A brief, firm pressure. "Come on. We cannot stay here. You are too exposed." He stood up, pulling a few bills from his pocket and dropping them on the table. Lena followed him, wiping her face with her sleeve. "I should take a taxi," she said weakly as they stepped out into the cool afternoon air. "No taxis," Dante said. "I am driving you." He led her not to the main street, but around the corner into a narrow, brick-lined alley where the black sedan was parked, idling quietly. Nico was not in the driver's seat this time. Dante opened the back door for her, then slid in beside her. The privacy of the car was instantaneous. The tinted windows blocked out the world, creating a cocoon of silence and leather. Dante didn't start the engine immediately. He turned in the seat to face her. "Are you okay?" he asked. Lena nodded, though she was still trembling. Being this close to him again, in the same car where their worlds had collided the night before, brought a fresh wave of adrenaline. But it wasn't fear. It was something else. It was the realization that this dangerous man was the only person on Earth who was telling her the truth. "Thank you," she said softly. "For what?" "For not treating me like a porcelain doll," Lena said, meeting his gaze. "My father. He treats me like something to be displayed, something fragile that will break if the wind blows too hard. You told me the truth, even though it hurt. You treated me like I could handle it." Dante studied her face, his gaze tracing the line of her jaw, the dampness on her eyelashes. "You are not fragile." "Lena," he murmured, "you jumped into a stranger's car to escape a pack of wolves. You stared down a gunman last night. You are stronger than you think." He shifted closer. The space between them seemed to vanish. Lena felt her heart rate pick up, but this time it was a heavy, rhythmic thudding of anticipation. "I don't feel strong," she whispered. "I feel like my world is falling apart." "Let it fall," Dante said, his voice dropping to a rough whisper. "If it was built on lies, let it fall. You will build something better." He reached out, his hand cupping her jaw. His palm was warm, his skin rough against the softness of her cheek. His thumb traced the line of her cheekbone, wiping away a lingering tear. Lena leaned into his touch. It was instinctive. She craved the contact, the solidity of him. Her eyes searched his, looking for hesitation, but she found only a dark, burning hunger. "Dante," she breathed. His restraint cracked. He made a low sound in his throat and leaned in. When his lips touched hers, it wasn't like the polite, closed-mouth kisses she had experienced with the sons of her father's partners. It was slow, deliberate, and consuming. He tasted of coffee and danger. Lena gasped softly against his mouth, and Dante took the invitation. Deepening the kiss, she melted into him. Her hands, which had been clenched in her lap, moved of their own accord. One slid up his chest, feeling the hard muscle beneath the leather jacket, the other tangled into the hair at the nape of his neck, pulling him closer. Dante groaned low in his chest, a vibration she felt against her own body. He shifted, angling his body toward her on the leather seat, his free arm wrapped firmly around her waist, pulling her flush against him. There was no space left between them. She could feel the heat radiating off him, the power in the arm that held her. The kiss grew heated, urgent. It was a release of all the fear and tension of the last 24 hours. Lena pressed closer, her body arching into his. hungry for the friction, for the reality of him. For a moment, there was no Northbridge, no Vascari, no disappointed father. There was just the smell of leather, the taste of him, and the desperate, wild feeling of being alive. Dante's hand moved from her jaw to the back of her neck, his fingers threading through her hair, tilting her head back to deepen the angle. Lena made a soft sound of want, her fingers gripping the lapels of his jacket. Suddenly, a car door slammed somewhere in the alley. The sound was like a gunshot. Dante froze. His survival instincts kicked in instantly. He pulled back, breaking the kiss, his head snapping toward the window. He listened for a second, his body rigid against hers. Silence returned to the alley. It was just a delivery driver or a resident. Dante let out a ragged breath. He turned back to her, but the spell was broken. The reality of where they were and who they were crashed back in. He didn't pull away completely. He rested his forehead against hers. His eyes closed. His breathing was heavy, matching hers. "I shouldn't have done that," he whispered, his voice rough with regret and desire. Lena kept her eyes closed, savoring the feeling of his breath on her skin. "Do not apologize. Please." Dante pulled back slightly so he could look at her. His eyes were dark, swirling with emotions she couldn't quite name: guilt, longing, and a fierce protectiveness. "You are the heiress to the throne, Lena, and I am the barbarian at the gate. Us. It is dangerous." "I don't care," Lena said, and she meant it. "For the first time in my life, I don't care what is safe." Dante brushed a strand of hair behind her ear, his touch lingering. "I can't promise to be gentle with the world, Lena," he said, his voice a low vow that seemed to vibrate in her bones. "The world is an ugly place, and I have to be uglier to survive it." He paused, looking at her lips, then back to her eyes. "But with you," he whispered, "with you, I will try." Lena looked at him, her heart aching in her chest. She realized then that she was already past the point of no return. She hadn't just gotten into a car with a stranger. She had let him in. "Take me with you," she said softly. "I can't go back to that house." "Not yet." Dante shook his head. "I have to take you to a safe house, not mine, somewhere neutral. Vascari knows I have an interest in you now. If I keep you with me, I put a target on your back." He straightened up, putting a painful distance between them. He turned the key in the ignition, and the engine purred to life. "We need a plan. Lena, we need evidence that sticks, hard evidence, the kind the feds cannot ignore." "I can get it," Lena said, sitting up straighter. Her lips still tingled from his kiss, but a new resolve was hardening in her stomach. "My father keeps a private server in his home office. If the Northbridge data is anywhere, it is there. It is too dangerous," Dante said, putting the car in gear. "I live there. Dante, I have the keys. I know the codes." Lena reached out, touching his arm. "Let me do this. Let me help you take them down." Dante looked at her hand on his arm, then at the fierce determination in her eyes. He nodded once, a sharp, decisive movement. "Okay, but you stay on the line with me the entire time, and if anything feels wrong, anything at all, you run." The house was quiet, buried under the heavy silence of 3 in the morning. Lena Martelli sat in her father's private study, the only light coming from the glow of the computer monitor. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. She felt like an intruder in her own life. Getting into the system had been terrifyingly easy. She knew her father's passwords because he used the same variation of her mother's birthday and the year the first Marcelli Hotel opened for everything. It was a sign of his arrogance. He believed he was untouchable. So why bother with complex security inside his own castle? Lena opened the folder labeled Northbridge Holdings. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic rhythm that seemed to echo in the large, mahogany-paneled room. She expected to find spreadsheets. She expected to find tax returns or perhaps some creative accounting. Instead, she found a graveyard. There were hundreds of files. Invoices for materials that were never purchased. consultation fees for millions of dollars paid to shell companies in the Cayman Islands. But the worst were the emails. She clicked on one dated 6 months ago. The sender was an encrypted address, but the signature was a single initial. M. Victor. The payment is late. My patience is not a renewable resource. If the transfer is not completed by Friday, we will take the interest out in structural damage, or perhaps we will pay a visit to Elise at the charity luncheon. Your choice. Lena clamped a hand over her mouth. They had threatened her mother, and her father had paid. The transfer receipt was attached to the email, dated the very next day. She kept clicking, her stomach churning with nausea. It was a chronicle of extortion and complicity. Her father was not just a businessman making bad deals. He was a man drowning, and he was using the family empire as a life raft that was slowly taking on water. Then she found the folder marked Personnel, Incident 1104. She opened it. It was a scanned police report from 5 years ago regarding a maintenance worker named David Miller, who had fallen down an elevator shaft at the flagship Marcelli Hotel. It had been ruled an accidental death due to equipment failure. The family had been paid a settlement, and the case was closed. But underneath the police report was another email from Northbridge. Problem resolved. Miller was going to talk to the unions about the money laundering. He will not be talking to anyone now. Transfer the cleaning fee to the usual account. Lena stopped breathing. It was not an accident. It was a hit. A murder disguised as a tragedy, orchestrated to protect the secrets she was currently reading. And her father had paid the bill. The room suddenly felt ice cold. The luxury, the art on the walls, the expensive rug beneath her feet, it all smelled like copper and rot. Lena grabbed a flash drive from the desk drawer. Her hands were shaking so badly she dropped it twice before managing to plug it into the port. She dragged the files over, watching the progress bar crawl across the screen. "Come on," she whispered, glancing at the heavy oak door. "Come on." The moment the transfer hit 100%, she yanked the drive out. She shut down the computer, wiped the keyboard with her sleeve to remove fingerprints, and slipped out of the room like a ghost. 30 minutes later, Lena was in the back of a taxi, heading toward the industrial district. She had sent a text to the number on the burner phone Dante had given her. "I have it. Meet me." The location he sent back was a private parking garage near the docks, a concrete fortress owned by one of his shell companies. When the taxi dropped her off at the corner, the streets were empty and slick with mist. Lena walked the last block, her coat pulled tight, the flash drive burning a hole in her pocket. The garage door rolled up as she approached, triggered by a remote sensor. She stepped inside. It was cavernous and dim, lit by flickering fluorescent strips. In the center of the empty concrete floor sat the black sedan. It looked like a predator sleeping in a cave. The back door opened before she even reached it. "Get in!" Dante's voice echoed from the shadows of the interior. Lena climbed inside. The warmth of the car hit her, a stark contrast to the damp chill of the morning. Dante was sitting in the back seat this time, dressed in black, his face illuminated by the soft glow of a tablet he was holding. He looked at her, and his expression tightened. He saw the terror in her eyes. "You found something," he stated. It was not a question. Lena nodded mutely. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the flash drive. She placed it in his hand. Her fingers were ice cold against his warm skin. Dante plugged the drive into an adapter on his tablet. He didn't speak. He just started swiping through the files. Lena sat next to him, their shoulders pressed together in the tight space. She could smell the soap he used, the faint scent of gun oil, and the underlying musk of a man who lived on the edge of violence. It was a grounding scent, something real in a world that had just turned into a nightmare. "This is it," Dante murmured, his eyes scanning a spreadsheet, the paper trail. These transfers linked directly to Vescori's accounts in Macau. He kept scrolling. Lena watched the screen, dread pooling in her stomach. She knew what was coming. He opened the email about the threats. His jaw clenched. "He threatened your mother," Dante said, his voice dropping to a low growl. "Marco Vescari has no honor. He targets women to make men bend." He kept going. Then he hit the file about David Miller. Dante went still. He read the email twice. Then he looked up, turning his head to face Lena. The blue light of the tablet cast sharp shadows on his face, making him look dangerous, but his eyes were filled with a sudden, profound sorrow. "Lena," he said softly. "I knew him," Lena whispered. Her voice broke. "David. He used to fix the heating in my room when I was a teenager. He had a daughter. He used to show me pictures of her." Tears welled up in her eyes, hot and fast. "My father paid for it. Dante. He paid them to kill him. It was Viscari's men who did the deed," Dante said, trying to offer a lifeline. "But my father paid the bill," Lena cried out. The dam broke. The composure she had held onto since leaving the house shattered. He knew. He covered it up. "My whole life. Everything I have. It is built on blood. I am eating food bought with blood money. I am wearing clothes paid for by a murder." She buried her face in her hands, her body racking with sobs. It was a visceral, ugly grief, the sound of a worldview collapsing in on itself. She felt tainted, complicit, and utterly horrified. Dante didn't hesitate. He dropped the tablet onto the floorboard. He reached out and pulled her into him. Lena collapsed against his chest. She grabbed the lapels of his leather jacket, burying her face in the crook of his neck. She sobbed until her throat burned, letting out all the fear and the guilt she had been carrying. Dante held her tightly. One arm wrapped around her waist, anchoring her to him. The other hand moved to the back of her head, his fingers tangling in her hair, pressing her closer. He didn't shush her. He didn't tell her it would be okay, because that would have been a lie. He just held her, absorbing her pain, becoming the solid wall she could crash against without breaking. He began to rub circles on her back, a slow, rhythmic motion. "You are not him," Dante murmured into her hair. His voice was a rumble in his chest against her ear. "You are not your father, Lena. You are the one exposing this. You are the one stopping it. I feel sick." Lena gasped, her breath hitching. "I know," Dante said. "I know. Breathe. Lena, just breathe." They sat like that for a long time. The only sound in the garage was Lena's ragged breathing and the distant hum of the city waking up outside. Slowly, the tears subsided, leaving Lena feeling hollowed out but strangely light. She didn't pull away. She stayed there, resting against him, listening to the steady, strong beat of his heart. It was a warrior's heart, calm in the face of chaos. She lifted her head slowly. Her face was inches from his. Her eyes were swollen, her cheeks flushed, her lashes wet with tears. She felt raw and exposed, stripped of all her heiress armor. Dante looked down at her. His expression was fierce, protective. He raised his hand and used his thumb to gently brush away a tear that clung to her lower lash. His touch was incredibly tender for a man who could dismantle a rival crew with a single command. "You should not be here," he whispered, his voice rough. "You should be somewhere safe, somewhere light." "There is no light anymore," Lena said softly. "There is just the truth. And you are the only one who told it to me." The air in the car shifted. The grief began to recede, replaced by something hotter, sharper. The proximity between them, which had been comforting a moment ago, suddenly became electric. Lena became hyper-aware of his hand on her back, the heat of his thigh pressed against hers, the way his gaze dropped to her lips and stayed there. She realized with a jolt that she didn't want to leave his arms. She wanted to get closer. She wanted to erase the memory of the file, the emails, the betrayal, and replace it with something undeniable, something that made her feel alive. Dante. She breathed. She didn't wait for him to make the move this time. She needed to be the one to choose. She shifted, turning her body fully toward him. She reached up, her hand cupping the back of his neck, her fingers sliding into the short, dark hair there. Dante went still, his eyes searching hers for any sign of hesitation. When he found none, his pupils dilated. Lena leaned in and pressed her lips to his. It started slow, a tasting, a question. But the moment their mouths connected, the dam broke for him too. Dante groaned, a low, guttural sound of surrender. He opened his mouth, deepening the kiss, his tongue sweeping against hers. It wasn't gentle. It was desperate. It was the collision of two people who were standing on the edge of a cliff. Lena moved. The back seat was cramped, but she didn't care. She climbed onto his lap, straddling him, her knees bracketing his hips on the leather bench. The position was intimate, vulnerable, and incredibly bold. She felt the hard ridge of his belt buckle against her stomach, the solid muscles of his thighs beneath her. Dante's hands went to her waist, gripping her firmly, holding her in place. He pulled her flush against him, eliminating every millimeter of space. Lena gasped into his mouth as she felt the full extent of his desire. He was hard, dangerous, and completely hers in this moment. She pressed closer, grinding down slightly, needing the friction. The kiss became urgent, wet and consuming. Her hands roamed over his chest, gripping his jacket, then sliding inside to feel the heat of his shirt. Dante's hands slid down her back, cupping her hips, kneading the flesh there with a possessive strength that made her head spin. For the first time in her life, Lena felt seen. He wasn't holding the Marcelli heiress. He was holding Lena. He was holding the woman who had broken into a safe, who had faced down the truth, who was brave enough to want a man the world told her to fear. And Dante felt his walls crumbling. He had spent 10 years building a fortress around his emotions, convincing himself that he could never have this, someone soft, someone good. But she was in his arms, clinging to him like he was her salvation, and he knew with terrifying clarity that he would burn the city down before he let anyone hurt her. He pulled back just an inch, both of them gasping for air. His forehead rested against hers. His eyes were dark, blown wide with lust and emotion. "Lena," he rasped, "if we do not stop, I am not going to be able to stop." Lena looked at him, her lips swollen, her hair messy. She looked beautiful. She looked wrecked. "I don't want you to stop," she whispered. Dante closed his eyes for a second, fighting a war within himself. He wanted her. God, he wanted her, but not here. Not in a garage with a tablet full of evidence of her father's crimes sitting on the floor. Not when she was reeling from trauma. He took a deep breath and opened his eyes. He framed her face with his hands, his thumbs stroking her cheekbones. "We have a war to fight," he said, his voice thick with regret. "And when I have you, I want to give you everything, not a quick fumble in a back seat while we are hiding." Lena stared at him, her chest heaving. She knew he was right. She nodded slowly, leaning forward to kiss him one last time. Soft, lingering, a promise. "Okay," she whispered. She climbed off his lap, settling back into the seat beside him. The loss of contact was physical pain. She adjusted her sweater, her face burning, but she didn't look away from him. Dante watched her, his hand reaching out to squeeze hers. "We need a plan," he said, forcing his voice back to business. "This evidence. It is enough to bury Northbridge, but it will bury your father, too." "I know," Lena said, her voice steadying. She looked at the tablet on the floor. "But if we can prove he was coerced, if we can prove Vescari threatened my mother, maybe we can get him a deal. Cooperation for a reduced sentence." "It is a long shot," Dante warned. "The feds love a billionaire defendant. It is the only shot he has." Lena said, "I won't let him get away with it, Dante. But I won't let Vescari kill him either. I want Northbridge destroyed." Dante nodded, a grim smile touching his lips. "That I can do. We take this to a contact I have at the Bureau, a man who hates Vescari as much as I do. We leak the financial records first, freeze their assets, then we drop the murder file." Suddenly, Dante's phone buzzed in his pocket. It wasn't a text. It was a call. He pulled it out, his expression shifting instantly from lover to soldier. "Yeah," he answered. He listened for 3 seconds. His eyes snapped to Lena, cold and alert. "Where?" he asked sharply. "How many?" He listened again, then swore. "Understood. Pull the perimeter back. Do not engage unless they breach the inner gate. I am en route." He hung up. The car seemed to shrink around them. "What is it?" Lena asked, her heart jumping into her throat. "Marco," Dante said, "his men have been spotted near the Marcelli estate. They are not just watching anymore. Lena, they are scouting for an entry point. My parents—" Lena gasped. Your parents have a full security detail, Dante said. Starting the car, the engine roared to life, the sound echoing off the concrete walls. Vascari is not going to storm a fortress for them. He's looking for you. He thinks you went home. He put the car in gear, his hand resting on the shifter, and he looked at her. You cannot go back there. Lena, if you step foot on that property, you are a hostage. Where do I go? She asked. You are coming with me, Dante stated. I have a penthouse in the financial district. It is under a shell name. Private elevator, reinforced steel doors, bulletproof glass. It is the safest place in the city. Lena felt a shiver run through her. It was fear. Yes, the idea of being hunted was terrifying, but beneath the fear was a thrill she couldn't deny. He was taking her into his world. He was choosing to protect her, not because she was an assignment, but because she was his. Take me, she said. Dante nodded. He gunned the engine, and the black sedan peeled out of the garage, racing toward the dawn and the war that was waiting for them. The elevator ride to the top of the Millennium Tower took exactly 45 seconds. Lena counted the seconds in her head to keep her hands from shaking. When the heavy steel doors slid open, she expected opulence. She expected the kind of gilded, velvet-draped luxury that filled her parents' estate, money shouting to be heard. Instead, Dante's penthouse was silence and glass. The space was massive, an open-concept fortress of concrete floors, gray slate walls, and floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of Harborview City. It was stark, almost clinically minimalist. There were no ornate rugs, no oil paintings of ancestors, no clutter. A black leather sectional sat in the center of the room facing the view, flanked by a low coffee table made of reclaimed steel. A sleek, modern kitchen occupied the far wall, the counters completely bare. It did not look like a home. It looked like a command center. Or a cage. Make yourself comfortable, Dante said, tossing his keys onto a side table. The sound echoed in the quiet room. I need to secure the perimeter and check in with my team. The guest room is down the hall to the left. The bathroom is stocked. Lena walked to the window, hugging her arms around herself. The city looked different from up here. From the street, it was chaotic and loud. From her father's mansion, it was distant and owned. But from here, it looked like a circuit board, a grid of lights and moving parts that Dante Moretti controlled. She turned to look at the room again, trying to find a trace of the man beneath the legend. Her eyes landed on a single frame sitting on a floating shelf near the hallway. It was the only personal item in the entire living area. She walked over to it. The photograph was black and white, slightly grainy. It showed two young men standing on a pier, arms thrown over each other's shoulders, laughing at something off camera. One was Dante, younger, his face less guarded, his smile wide and genuine. The other boy looked just like him, but softer, with lighter eyes and a carefree posture. That is Carlo. Dante's voice came from behind her. Lena jumped slightly. Turning around, Dante had removed his leather jacket and shoulder holster. He stood in the middle of the room, rolling up the sleeves of his black shirt, his eyes fixed on the photo. Your brother? Lena asked softly. Dante nodded. He walked over, picking up the frame. His thumb traced the glass over the other boy's face. He was the one who was supposed to run things, Dante said, his voice devoid of emotion, though his eyes told a different story. Carlo was charismatic. He was a diplomat. He wanted to legitimize the family business, turn it into something clean. I was just the muscle. I was happy being the muscle. What happened? Lena asked, though she suspected she knew the answer. Marco Vascari happened, Dante said, setting the frame back down with precise care. 5 years ago, Marco wanted our shipping routes. Carlo tried to negotiate a peace treaty. He walked into a meeting with a smile and an open hand. He came out in a body bag. Lena felt a chill run through her. She looked at Dante, at the hardness in his jaw, the vigilance in his posture, and suddenly understood. He wasn't a crime boss because he craved power. He was a crime boss because he was a soldier who had picked up his fallen brother's sword. I took over the next day, Dante continued, turning to face her, and I learned a lesson that Carlo died for. You cannot negotiate with wolves. "Lena, you have to shoot them." He looked at her then, his gaze intense. "That is why I am going to destroy Northbridge. Not just for business. For Carlo. And now, for you." The night dissolved into a blur of strategy and caffeine. They sat at the long dining table, surrounded by laptops and tablets. Dante was on the phone constantly, speaking in rapid-fire Italian and coded English to his lieutenants. Lena sat opposite him, organizing the files she had stolen. It was strange. Working with him. She should have been terrified. She was plotting the downfall of her father's partners with a Mafia don, but instead of fear, she felt a profound sense of purpose. For the first time in her life, she wasn't just observing the business, she was shaping it. Dante's tech specialist, a disembodied voice on speakerphone, confirmed the timeline. "We have the leak ready to go. Boss. The financial records go to the IRS and the FBI anonymous tip line at 8 in the morning. The press gets the summary at 9. By noon, Northbridge stock will be radioactive." "Good," Dante said. "What about Marco?" "He took the bait," the voice replied. "He thinks the meeting regarding the waterfront project is real. He's expecting to strong-arm you into signing over the rights." "Let him think that," Dante said grimly. "Tell him I agreed to the meet. 7 in the evening. Warehouse 4. Dante hung up the phone and rubbed his temples. The clock on the wall read 3 in the morning. The adrenaline that had fueled them for hours was beginning to fade, replaced by a heavy, quiet exhaustion. Lena pushed her laptop away and stood up, stretching her stiff muscles. She walked over to the kitchen island where a coffee pot had been working overtime. She poured 2 cups and carried them back to the living area. Dante had moved to the couch, staring out at the city lights, lost in thought. Lena set the cups down on the steel table and sat next to him, leaving a respectable distance between them. But the air in the room felt charged, the silence intimate rather than awkward. "You should sleep," Dante said, without looking at her. "Tomorrow is going to be a war." "I can't sleep," Lena admitted. She tucked her legs up under her, wrapping her hands around the warm ceramic mug. "I keep thinking about my father." Dante turned his head, resting it against the back of the couch to look at her. "Do you regret doing it?" "No," Lena said quickly. Then she hesitated. "Yes, maybe. Not the doing of it, but the reality of it. I always knew my family was complicated, but I thought I was part of it. I thought I mattered to him." "You do matter to him," Dante said. "Do I?" Lena asked, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. "I matter like a vase matters. Dante, I matter like a well-placed rug. I was raised to be perfect, to speak 3 languages, to play the piano, to wear the dress and smile at the investors. I was an asset, and when the asset became inconvenient, when I started asking questions, he didn't protect me. He just managed me." She looked down at her coffee, the dark liquid trembling slightly. "I have spent my whole life in a glass box," she whispered. "Everyone looking in, admiring the view, but no one ever asked if I could breathe." Dante moved then. He didn't say anything at first. He just shifted on the couch, closing the distance between them. He reached out and took the cup from her hands, setting it on the table. Then he took her hands in his. "You are not a decoration." "Lena," he said, his voice low and rough. "I feel like one," she countered, tears pricking her eyes. "I feel small. Against all of this. Vescari, the syndicate, the feds. I'm just a girl who stole a flash drive." Dante stood up, pulling her with him. He led her to the massive window, where the city sprawled out below them like a sea of electric stars. He stood behind her, his body a solid, warm wall against her back. He slid his arms around her waist, locking his hands together over her stomach, pulling her back until she was resting completely against him. "Look at that city," Dante murmured, his chin resting near her temple. His breath ghosted over her ear, sending a shiver down her spine. "It is huge," Lena whispered. "It is a machine," Dante corrected. "It eats people. It chewed up my brother. It corrupted your father. But you stood up to it." He tightened his hold on her, secure and grounding. "You walked into a meeting with a killer and didn't flinch. You broke into the lion's den to get the truth. You are not small, Lena. You are the only one brave enough to face the rot." Lena turned in his arms. The movement was slow, inevitable. She looked up into his face. The shadows of the room softened his sharp angles, but his eyes were burning with a terrifying intensity. "You make me feel brave," she whispered. "No," Dante said, shaking his head slightly. "You were always brave. I just gave you a ride." The tension that had been simmering between them since the car chase, since the garage, finally boiled over. It wasn't an explosion, it was a surrender. Dante lowered his head, and Lena rose to meet him. The kiss was different this time. It wasn't frantic or desperate. It was deep, slow, and devastatingly thorough. It was acclaiming. Dante's hands roamed over her back, tracing the line of her spine, memorizing the shape of her. Lena's hands moved to his chest, bunching the fabric of his shirt, pulling him closer until there was no air left between them. They moved together, a clumsy, beautiful dance toward the couch. They didn't break the kiss. They sank onto the leather cushions, limbs tangling. Lena ended up straddling his lap again, but this time it felt anchored, right. She pressed her forehead against his, breathing him in. "Dante," she breathed, her voice wrecked. Dante's hands were on her waist, his thumbs rubbing circles against her hips through her sweater. He kissed her jaw, her neck, the sensitive spot behind her ear. Lena arched into him, a soft sound escaping her throat. The heat in the room spiked, becoming a physical weight. His hands slid up under the back of her sweater, his palms warm against her bare skin. Lena gasped, her own hands moving to the buttons of his shirt. She fumbled with them, her fingers shaking with want. Dante stopped her. He caught her hands in his, holding them still against his chest. His breathing was ragged, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm beneath her palms. Lena looked at him, confused, her lips swollen and red. "What is it?" Dante closed his eyes for a second, fighting for control. When he opened them, the desire was still there, burning hot, but something else was stronger. "Not tonight," he rasped. Lena pulled back slightly, hurt flashing in her eyes. "You don't want me?" Dante let out a harsh, incredulous laugh. "Lena, I want you more than I want my next breath. I want to take you into the bedroom and keep you there for a week. I want to map every inch of you." He brought her hands to his mouth, kissing her knuckles tenderly. "But not like this. Not when we are running on adrenaline and fear. Not when I have to go to war in 5 hours." He looked at her with a fierce, solemn sincerity. "When I have you, Lena, I want your head to be clear. I want us to be safe. I want it to be a beginning, not a desperate moment in the middle of a battle." Lena searched his face. She saw the truth in his eyes. He wasn't rejecting her. He was honoring her. He was protecting the thing growing between them, ensuring it wasn't tainted by the violence of their current reality. She smiled, a soft, genuine curve of her lips. "You are a frustrating man." "Dante Moretti." "I try," he murmured, leaning in to kiss her forehead. He pulled her down so she was curling against his side, her head on his chest. He grabbed a throw blanket from the back of the couch and draped it over them. "Sleep," he commanded softly. "I will keep watch." And for the first time in her life, surrounded by the danger of a Mafia penthouse, Lena fell asleep feeling completely safe. The morning sun hit the glass of the penthouse like a spotlight, harsh and unforgiving. The softness of the night before had evaporated, replaced by the cold steel of the plan. Dante was already dressed when Lena woke up. He wore a charcoal suit, a crisp white shirt, and a tie that looked like liquid mercury. He looked impeccable. He looked like a shark. "The leak is out," he said as she sat up, rubbing the sleep from her eyes. "Northbridge is trending on every financial news network. The stock is in free fall. The FBI has announced a preliminary inquiry." "What about my father?" Lena asked, the knot of anxiety returning to her stomach. "He's not named yet," Dante said, "but he will be. The trail leads directly to his door." Lena stood up, smoothing her clothes. "I have to go see him." Dante paused in the middle of checking his watch. "No, absolutely not. You stay here." "Dante, I have to," Lena insisted, walking toward him. "The feds are going to raid the estate. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but soon. I need to face him. I need to hear him admit it. And I need to get my things. If I am going to disappear, I cannot do it with nothing." "It is too dangerous," Dante said, his voice hard. "Marco is out there. Marco thinks I am with you," Lena argued. "He thinks I am your weakness. If I go home, it looks like I left you. It looks like we fought. It confuses the narrative. And besides, the estate is a fortress. My father has doubled the security since I disappeared." Dante stared at her, his jaw working. He hated it. Every instinct he had screamed to lock her in this tower until the smoke cleared, but he saw the look in her eyes. It was the same look she had when she handed him the flash drive. She needed closure. She needed to sever the tie herself. "I will send Nico with a shadow team," Dante said finally. "They will not go onto the property, but they will be at the gate. You go in, you talk to him, you get a bag, and you get out. 30 minutes, 30 minutes, Lena agreed. Dante grabbed her by the shoulders and pulled her in for a hard, bruising kiss. "Be careful," he whispered against her lips. "I will see you tonight," she promised. "After you finish this." Dante left for the warehouse, walking into the trap he had set for Marco. Lena took the elevator down to the garage, where Nico was waiting with a nondescript sedan. The drive to the Marcelli estate was tense. When they arrived at the massive iron gates, the security guard, a man Lena had known since she was 10, waved them through without question. "Wait here," Lena told Nico as the car idled in the circular driveway. "Keep the engine running." She walked into the house. It was strangely quiet. The staff seemed to be making themselves scarce, sensing the storm coming. She found Victor in the library. He was pacing, a phone pressed to his ear, shouting at someone about stock prices. When he saw Lena, he froze. He hung up the phone without saying goodbye. "You came back," he said, relief washing over his face. "Thank God. Lena, where have you been? The news." "It is a disaster. Northbridge is collapsing. We need to issue a statement. We need to say you were at a spa retreat." Lena stood in the doorway, looking at the man she had idolized for 20 years. He looked smaller today. "Older. I wasn't at a spa. Father," she said, her voice steady, "I was with the people you pay to kill your employees." Victor went pale. "What are you talking about?" "I saw the file," she said, stepping into the room. "Incident 1104, David Miller." Victor sank into his leather chair as if his strings had been cut. "You were not supposed to see that. You paid them," Lena said, her voice rising. "You paid Marco Vascari to murder a man who had a daughter." "It was business," Victor shouted, slamming his hand on the desk. "It was survival. Lena, you think I wanted that? Vascari had us in a vice. If Miller talked, the union would have walked. The hotel would have stalled. We would have lost everything. I did it for this family. I did it for you. Do not put this on me," Lena said, her voice icy. "You did it for your ego. You did it because you couldn't bear to fail." She looked around the room, the leather books, the expensive art, the crystal decanters. "I am leaving," she said. "Leaving?" Victor asked, confused. "Where are you going?" "Away from you," Lena said. "I am done being your asset." She turned and walked out. She didn't go upstairs to pack a bag. She didn't want the clothes. She didn't want the jewelry. She just wanted out. She walked toward the front door, her heart pounding. She had done it. She was free. She reached for the handle of the heavy oak door. Suddenly, a hand clamped over her mouth from behind. A cloth, damp and smelling of chemicals, was pressed hard against her nose and mouth. Lena tried to scream, but the sound was smothered. She thrashed, kicking back, but the person holding her was immense. She saw a flash of movement in her peripheral vision. 2 men in ski masks emerging from the hallway leading to the servants' quarters. How did they get in? The security... Her vision blurred. The adrenaline that had fueled her confrontation drained away, replaced by a heavy, suffocating darkness. She tried to reach for her pocket, for the burner phone. Her fingers brushed the denim of her jeans. The phone slipped from her grasp, clattering onto the marble floor. It slid under the foyer table, the screen lighting up with a half-composed message to Dante. "I'm safe. I'm coming to..." The message was never sent. "Got her." A rough voice growled in her ear. The darkness swallowed her whole. Across the city, in a rusted warehouse by the docks, Dante Moretti checked his gun. He had 10 men positioned in the rafters. He was ready to end Marco Vescari. He checked his phone one last time. No message from Lena. She must be packing, he told himself. He holstered his weapon and walked into the warehouse, unaware that the real war had just shifted fronts, and he had already lost the opening move. The warehouse on the waterfront was a hollow shell of corrugated steel and rust. The wind off the harbor whistled through the gaps in the metal, creating a low, mournful tone that sounded like a warning. Dante Moretti stepped out of his car, his footsteps echoing on the cracked concrete. He was alone, or at least, that is what he wanted Marco Vescari to believe. He stopped in the center of the vast, empty space. A single industrial light hung from the rafters, casting a sickly yellow pool of illumination. There was no table set up for negotiation. There were no guards visible. It was too quiet. It was too staged. Dante did not reach for his weapon. He stood perfectly still, his senses expanding, feeling the weight of the silence. His phone buzzed. He pulled it out slowly. It was a video call request from an unknown number. He accepted it, holding the screen up to the light. The image that flickered into view made the blood in his veins turn to ice. It was a small, dim room with peeling wallpaper. In the center, tied to a heavy wooden chair, was Lena. She looked battered. Her hair was matted to her forehead with sweat. There was a purpling bruise blooming on her cheekbone, and her lip was split. But her eyes were open, and they were burning with a fierce, terrified defiance. A man stood behind her, his face obscured by a mask, his heavy hand gripping her shoulder hard enough to whiten the skin. Dante felt a rage so pure and white-hot it nearly blinded him, but he forced it down, locking it behind the steel walls of his discipline. He needed to be a general now, not a lover. Marco Vescari's voice came from the phone speakers, smooth and mocking. "You look lonely." "Dante, where is she?" "Marco," Dante asked. His voice was not a shout. It was a low, flat sound, like a stone dropping into a deep well. "She's comfortable enough," Marco replied, "for now. But that depends entirely on you." The camera panned slightly, showing Marco sitting in a plush office, clearly miles away from the warehouse. "Here is the deal," Marco continued. "You walk away. You sign over the waterfront contracts. You dissolve your union ties, and you leave Harborview by midnight. You give me the city, and I give you the girl. You refuse, and, well, she is soft. Dante, she will not last long with my men." Dante stared at the screen, memorizing every pixel. He saw the peeling wallpaper behind Lena. He saw the specific pattern of water damage on the ceiling. He saw the type of window latch visible in the corner of the frame. He knew that room. It was not a random safe house. It was the old textile factory in the Iron District. Lena had mentioned it earlier when they were decoding the Northbridge files, a property purchased by a shell company just 3 weeks ago. Dante's mind raced. Triangulating the location, he needed time. He needed Marco to feel like he was winning. "Let me talk to her," Dante said. Marco laughed. "You want to say goodbye? Put her on, Marco. Or I hang up and burn your entire operation to the ground." Marco signaled the man in the room. The guard grabbed Lena's hair, yanking her head back to face the camera. "Dante," Lena gasped. Her voice was hoarse, but clear. "Don't do it. Do not give him anything." "Lena, listen to me," Dante said, his voice intense. "I am coming for you. Do you understand? Keep your eyes on me. I am not afraid of them," Lena said, her gaze shifting to the guard, then back to the lens. She spat blood onto the floor. "They are scared. Dante, I heard them talking. They know the feds are looking into the accounts. They are panicking. Shut her up," Marco roared from his end of the call. The guard raised his hand to strike her. "Touch her again and you are a dead man," Dante shouted, his voice cracking with fury. The guard hesitated, even through a screen. The promise of violence in Dante's voice was terrifying. "Tick-tock, Dante," Marco sneered. "You have 1 hour to send the transfer codes." Dante looked at the screen one last time, locking eyes with Lena. "Hold on." He ended the call. Immediately, the mask fell away. Dante tapped his earpiece. "Nico, did you get the trace?" "Triangulated." Nico's voice crackled in his ear. "Iron District. The textile factory on 4th? Move, Dante ordered, turning on his heel and sprinting back to his car. Team A stays here at the warehouse to secure the perimeter in case Marco sends a cleanup crew. Team B is with me. We hit the factory in 10 minutes. While Dante raced through the city, tearing through red lights. Lena sat in the dim room, her heart hammering against her ribs. The rope was digging into her wrists, chafing the skin until it bled, but the pain kept her sharp. She looked up at the guard. He was pacing now, checking his phone. "He's coming, you know," Lena said. Her voice shook slightly, but she forced the words out. The guard stopped pacing. "Shut up! He's coming, and he is not going to arrest you," Lena continued. She remembered what Dante had told her, that bullies only understand strength. Vescari is using you as a shield. He's sitting in a nice office while you are here, waiting to take the fall. "I said shut up," the guard shouted, stepping closer. "Do you really think Marco is going to pay you?" Lena asked, tilting her chin up. "I saw the ledgers. Northbridge is bankrupt. The accounts are frozen. You are doing this for free." The guard's eyes narrowed behind his mask. Doubt flickered there. Lena saw it. She pressed harder. "The feds are probably outside right now." She lied, though she hoped it was true. "If you walk away, you might live. If you stay, Dante will find you." The guard raised his hand again, but a sudden explosion rocked the building. Dust rained down from the ceiling. Gunfire erupted from the floor below. The guard's eyes went wide. He drew his weapon and moved to the door. Listening? Dante had arrived, outside the factory. It was controlled chaos. Dante's team had breached the perimeter with surgical precision. They weren't there to negotiate. They were there to clear a path. Dante moved through the hallway like a phantom. He held his weapon with a relaxed, deadly competence. Every corner he turned, he checked angles, his movement fluid. His men engaged Marco's thugs in the stairwell, the sound of shots ringing out like firecrackers in a tin can. Dante didn't stop for the fight. He pushed past his team, taking the stairs 2 at a time. He knew where she was. 3rd floor, east corner. He reached the landing. A thug stepped out from a doorway, raising a shotgun. Dante didn't break stride. He fired 2 shots, sharp, controlled. The man dropped, incapacitated before he could pull the trigger. Dante reached the door to the room. He didn't wait. He kicked it open, the wood splintering inward. The scene inside froze. The guard had grabbed Lena, hauling her up from the chair. He had one arm wrapped around her throat, choking her, and his other hand held a pistol pressed against her temple. "Drop it!" the guard screamed, his voice cracking with panic. "Back off or I blow her head off!" Dante stopped. He stood 10 feet away, his gun raised, leveled directly at the guard's face. His chest was heaving, but his hands were rock steady. "Let her go," Dante said. His voice was terrifyingly quiet. It was the voice of death itself. "I mean it," the guard yelled, dragging Lena backward. "I will kill her." Dante's eyes flicked to Lena. She was gasping for air, her face pale, but she wasn't struggling. She was looking at him with absolute trust. "You have 3 seconds," Dante said. "1!" the guard shouted. Dante didn't wait for 2. He saw the guard's finger tighten on the trigger. He saw the shift in his weight. Dante fired. The shot was deafening in the small room. The bullet didn't hit the guard in the head. It struck his hand, shattering the weapon and the bones holding it. The guard screamed, dropping the gun and reeling back, clutching his mangled hand. Lena fell forward, free. Dante crossed the room in a blur. He holstered his weapon and kicked the guard's gun into the corner. His men swarmed the room a second later, securing the screaming man and clearing the area. But Dante didn't look at them. He was already on his knees beside Lena. He pulled a knife from his boot and slashed the ropes binding her wrists. The moment she was free, she collapsed against him. Dante caught her. He wrapped his arms around her, pulling her into his chest with a force that knocked the wind out of her. He buried his face in her neck, his breathing ragged and harsh. "I have you," he whispered, his voice shaking. "I have you. You are safe." Lena clung to him. Her fingers dug into the leather of his jacket, holding on as if he were the only solid thing in a spinning world. She sobbed, a raw, guttural sound of release. "You came," she cried into his chest. "You came. I will always come for you," Dante vowed, Always. He picked her up then, lifting her into his arms as if she weighed nothing. He carried her out of the room, stepping over the debris, walking through the smoke and the ruin, carrying the only thing in the world that mattered to him. 3 hours later, the penthouse was quiet. The city lights outside were still glittering, indifferent to the violence that had just occurred. But inside, the atmosphere had shifted. The war room was gone. The laptops were closed. Lena lay in the massive bed in the master bedroom. She'd been checked by a private doctor, her cuts cleaned and bandaged. She wore one of Dante's t-shirts, which engulfed her small frame. Dante sat on the edge of the bed. He had showered, scrubbing the gunpowder and the grime from his skin, but he couldn't scrub away the guilt etched into his face. He looked at her hands, resting on the white duvet. Her wrists were wrapped in gauze. "I am sorry," he said. His voice was rough, barely a whisper. Lena turned her head on the pillow to look at him. "For what? For dragging you into this? For letting them touch you? I promised to protect you, and I failed." Lena reached out and took his hand. Her grip was weak, but firm. "You didn't fail, Dante. You saved me. I almost got you killed," Dante argued, staring at their joined hands. "When I saw you in that chair, when I saw him holding a gun to your head, I froze. Lena, for the first time in my life, I was terrified." He looked up at her, his gray eyes swimming with raw emotion. "I have lost people before," he confessed. "I lost my brother, I lost friends, but the thought of losing you, it broke me. It made me realize that I don't care about the territory. I don't care about the syndicate. If I have the whole city but I don't have you, I have nothing." Lena's eyes filled with tears. She pulled on his hand. "Come here." Dante hesitated, afraid to hurt her, but she insisted. He lay down beside her on top of the covers, careful not to jostle her. He rested on his side, facing her, his body forming a protective curve around hers. "You didn't drag me into the darkness." "Dante," Lena whispered, reaching up to trace the line of his jaw. "You showed me the truth. My life was a lie. You were the only real thing in it." She shifted closer, wincing slightly, until her forehead rested against his. "I love you," she said. Dante let out a shuddering breath. He closed his eyes, savoring the words. "I love you," he whispered back. He leaned in, bridging the small distance between them. The kiss was not hungry or urgent. It was soft. It was a benediction. His lips moved over hers with a tenderness that belied the violence of his hands just hours ago. He kissed her as if she were made of glass, but valuable glass, something precious, something to be cherished. His hand came up to rest over her heart. He could feel it beating, steady, strong, alive. He matched his breathing to hers, in, out, in, out. They lay there in the quiet dark, tangled together. There was no more plotting, no more running, just two people who had walked through fire and come out the other side, scorched but together. In the days that followed, the House of Cards collapsed. The evidence Dante had leaked was devastating. The FBI raided the Northbridge offices at dawn the next day. Assets were frozen, arrests were made. Marco Viscari, stripped of his funding and his political cover, attempted to flee the country but was intercepted at the airstrip. An anonymous tip from Dante's team ensuring the feds knew exactly where to find him. Victor Marcelli did not run. Confronted with the undeniable proof of his complicity and the public exposure of the murder cover-up, he cut a deal with the prosecutor. In exchange for a reduced sentence, he provided full testimony against Viscari's organization. He stepped down as CEO of the Marcelli Corporation, publicly taking responsibility for his errors in judgment. It was a scandal that rocked Harborview, but it cleared the way. Lena stepped into the vacuum. She didn't shy away from the press. She stood in front of the cameras, not as a sheltered heiress, but as the interim head of the company. She announced a full independent audit. She set up a fund for the families of the victims of Northbridge's negligence. She began the hard, slow work of rebuilding the empire on clean soil. And Dante began his own reconstruction. He didn't dismantle the syndicate overnight. That would have invited chaos, but he began to pivot. He sold off the weapons trade. He legitimized the shipping contracts. He started untangling his life from the bloodiest parts of the business. 2 weeks later, the black sedan pulled up to the overlook at Outlook Point. The engine cut, and silence settled over the car. Lena sat in the passenger seat. She was barefoot, her heels discarded on the floorboard. She wore a simple dress, her hair loose around her shoulders. She looked tired, but happy. Truly happy. Dante sat behind the wheel, watching her. He looked more relaxed than she had ever seen him. The tension that used to live in his shoulders was gone. Same spot, Lena noted, looking out at the glittering grid of the city below. Different circumstances. Dante replied, "The last time we were here, you were trying to call the police on me." Lena laughed. "And you were trying to tell me I was a spoiled brat. I said you were sheltered," Dante corrected with a smirk. "There is a difference." He reached across the console, taking her hand. His thumb rubbed the spot on her wrist where the bruise from the rope was fading to a faint yellow. "How was the board meeting?" he asked. "Brutal," Lena admitted. "Half of them want to resign. The other half want to rebrand, but we are making progress. I fired the CFO today." Dante whistled. "Ruthless? I like it. I learned from the best," she teased. She unbuckled her seatbelt and shifted, leaning across the center console. Dante met her halfway. "You know," Lena whispered, her lips inches from his, "I have a security detail now. Real professionals, ex-military." Dante raised an eyebrow. "Is that so?" "Yes, I don't really need a ride anymore." Dante's hand moved to the back of her neck, his fingers tangling in her hair. "So why are you here?" "Lena Marcelli." Lena kissed him. It was a slow, deep kiss that tasted of freedom and promise. When she pulled back, she was smiling. "Because I like the driver," she murmured. Dante chuckled, a low, warm sound. He looked out at the city. His city, her city. It was still dangerous. It was still complicated. But they weren't fighting it alone anymore. "Ready to go?" he asked. Lena settled back into her seat, resting her hand on his thigh. "Drive, Dante. Just drive." The car pulled away from the curb, heading not away from the city, but right into the heart of it, carrying two people who had decided that the only ride worth taking was the one they took together. Thank you so much for listening to The Heiress Asked for a Ride, but what she got was a wild night in the Mafia boss's car. I hope you enjoyed the journey of Lena and Dante as much as I enjoyed bringing it to life for you. It was a wild ride from that first accidental meeting to the final, hard-won, happily ever after. I would love to know where you are listening from today. Please drop a comment down below and tell me which country or city you are tuning in from. It is always amazing to see how far these stories travel. If you enjoyed this story, please make sure to subscribe to Mafia Romance Stories so you never miss an episode. We have so many more passionate, thrilling, and emotional stories coming your way. And finally, please share your thoughts on the ending in the comments. Did you like how Lena took charge? Were you rooting for Dante? I can't wait to read your feedback. Until next time, keep dreaming,